Beruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Yutes Amud Aleph at the very top. Our Mishnah states that the procedure on every Yom Kippurim is that the Ziknei Bezdin gives the Kohen Gadol over to the Ziknei Kahuna, whereby he's brought up to the Beis Abtinas. Asks the Gemara, or explains the Gemara Tano. It's taught Lelamdoi Chafina. What is he doing in the Beis Abtinas? He's being taught the avodah of chafina. Beis Avtinas is the place where they would make the kitaris, and the most difficult of the avodos of the mikdash is the chafina. That means that the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippurim takes a machta of gacheles in his right hand. He takes the kitaris, a shovelful of kitaris in his left hand, a kaf shel zav, and he walks into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim, he has to then take that kitaris, and he has to somehow get that kitaris from that shovel onto his hands, chafina, molei chofnov, and then put it onto the coals, whereby the smoke goes up. So he's taught that over there in the Beis Avtinas. Amar Apape, shtei lishkois hayu loy lekohen gadol. There were two lishkois, says Rav Papa, that the Kohen Gadol resided in, that he used. Achas lishkas parhedrin, va'achas lishkas beis avtinas. One was lishkas parhedrin, and one was lishkas avtinas. Achas bat sofin va'achas badorim. One was in the north of the Azora, while the other was in the south of the Azora. Achas b'tzofin, one that was in the north, this nan. It states, Vav lishkois hoyu ba'azara. There were 6 different lishkois, different rooms that were in the Azara. Gimel batzofoim ve'gimel badorim. 3 in the north and 3 in the south. Shebedorim, in the south of the Azara, were the following 3 lishkois. Lishkas hamelach, the lishka where they would keep the melach. Lishkas haparve, lishkas of the parve, was called parva. We'll explain what these things were done in these lishkos. Lishkas hamedichin, lishkas hamelach shesham hayu noisni melach lekarbin. There they would store the melach for the carbon. That's not where they would put actually melach onto the carbon. That was done on the mizbeach, the kevish. But they would indeed store the melach in this lishka called Beis HaMelach. Lishkas haparve shesham hayu molichin oirois kochim. There they would actually salt the skins of the kochim, of the karbonos. Ve'al gaga haisa beis tevila lekohen gadol b'yom kippurim. On the roof of the lishkas haparva was a mikvah that was from a spring, a natural spring, where the kohen gadol would toivel on Yom Kippurim. Lishkas hamedichin shom hayu madichin kirvei kochim. There, they would initially rinse out the stomach area for all the additional waste, because the actual rest of the meidichin, the rest of just the rinsing out, was done on the shulchanos. Umisham misiba oile legag beis haparva. From there was a round, a circular type of staircase that went up to the Beis haparva. So those are the 3 lishkos located in the south of the Azora. Gimel shebat sofoin. The 3 that were in the Tzafon, Lishkas HaEitz, Lishkas HaGoyle, Lishkas HaGozis. Lishkas HaEitz, the first one that was in the south, Omar Bialozar, Ben Yaakov Shochachti Maisa Mishameshes. Rabbi Elazar and Yaakov, who's the Stam Tano of Maseches Midos, he says over here, I don't remember what this Lishkas HaEitz was used for. Abba Shol Oimer, Lishkas Kohen Gadol Haisa Acharei Shteim. It was the lishka of the Kohen Gadol Haisa, and it was acharei shteim. It was behind the 2 other ones. The gag shloishten shava, the roof of the 3, the lishkas gozis, lishkas hagoyle, and lishkas ha'eit, all had the same level roof. That's in contrast to the 3 lishkos on the other side that were in the south that did not have the same level of roofs. Now it goes on to explain lishkas hagoyle, shom haya bor hagoyle. There was they bore the wellspring, the pit literally, but that's where they drew the well of the goyle, those who went from Golus. Galgal Nosun Elov, there was a wheel that they wanted to draw water from there, that was put there. Umishom Maspikin Mayim the Kol Azora, that's where they would provide water for the entire Azora. Lishkas Hagozis, which was of course the biggest of all of them, part of it was inside the Azora, part was outside the Azora, because the Sanhedrin who would sit there and adjudicate different cases, namely they were mostly involved with dealing with making sure that the Kohanim had the proper lineage, the proper yichus, as well as making sure that they didn't have any mumim. They would sit in the Lishkas HaGozis, and that was not possible if it was in the Azora, because only King David was able, and the dynasty of the Malchus is able to sit there. So therefore, to sit in Azor was not possible. So therefore, they had to sit outside the Azor, which is where this area of the Lishkas Hagozis was located. Shom Haisas Anir Shel Yisrael Yoshevas V'Donas HaKohanim. They would judge the Kohanim. In addition to any cases that the lower courts could not adjudicate, so those cases would go to the Lishkas Hagozis to determine the din. But on a daily basis, they're mostly busy with determining whether the Kohanim had proper yichus. The first time that the Kohen would do his avodah, they would check his lineage, and also they would check to make sure that the Kohanim were not bali mum before they did any avodah. Umisha nimsa by psul, if they found a Kohen that was disqualified, hayaloi v'shcharim atef shcharim v'yatzav halachloi, he would wear black, and he would then also wrap himself in black garments, and he would go out and leave the Azara area. V'sheloi nimsa boy psul, if it was a Kohen that did not find a psul in him, hayalavish levonim misatef levonim, he'd wear white garments and then wrap himself in white. V'nichnas v'shamesh im echov hakoyanim, then he would enter the Azara and serve with the other Kohanim. Achaz badorom. Now Reb Papa says, one that was located in the Dorom, this nan, meaning one of the lishkois of the Kohen Gadol that was located in the Dorom, he says, this nan, Shiva she'orim hoyu ba'azara. There are 7 gateways that were in the Azara. Gimel betzalfim ve'gimel bedorim. 3 in the north and 3 in the south. Ve'echad ba'mizrach, and 1 on the east. Shebedorim shar hadloka. On the south were the shar hadloka. Sheni Loi, to the second one to that was Shar HaKorbin, where they would have the Koche Kodashim that were brought through that Shar. Shlishi Loi Shar HaMayim. The Shar HaMayim to the right of that was Shar HaMayim, where they were Toivil. It also had a natural spring. Sheba Mizrach, in the east, was Shar Nikanor. That would be the main entrance going into the Azora. From the east to the west into the Azora was the Shar Nikanor. V'shtei lishkos hayu sham. There was 2 lishkos on either side of Shar Nikanor. Achaz b'yamino v'achaz b'smola, one to the right, one to the left. Achaz lishkos Pinchas Hamalbish. He was the one he was called Pinchas Hamalbish, but the person in charge there was the one who was responsible for clothing the Kohanim. V'achaz lishkas oise chavitin, and one was being designated for the making of the chavitin. That was the daily minchas offering that the Kohen Gadol would bring, but also any Kohen that would serve in the Beis HaMikdash for the first time would also bring a minchas chavitim. So that was done and prepared there in the lishkas chavitim. So that in regards to the one that was in the south. Now it states va'acha b'shebet Sofon. Now it says b'Sofon in the north. Shar Nitzoitz. There was a Shar Nitzois. It was called Shar of Nitzois. Binyan Achsadra Haya. It was made in such a way where it would go from the Azara outside to the Azara, outside the Azara, and this to the northwestern side of the Azara. It was built as an Achsadra. That means it was open at the end. It was closed in 3 places, but open with a lot of light coming in inside, given its name Shar Nitzois. The Aliyah Benuya Loy Al Gabov. There was also a Aliyah that would go up to another floor that was built on top of it. V'sham kohanim shoymim l'mala u'levim l'mata. There was a watch, not because there was a concern that people necessarily are going to then break in, but rather to give kavod to the Makom Mikdash, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's palace, and therefore it was required that the Kohanim and the Levim watch, the way they have a Shoimrim, in those places over there. Vishalifnim, inside Himenu, Hechel, the Chel area was right outside the Azara, that was an area that was called the Chel. Sheni Loi, to the right of that, was Shar HaKarbin, the Shar HaKarbin. Oh, here's the Shar HaKarbin that we mentioned before, and this is a Shar that the Kodesh Kodashim would go through, because that's where the Kodesh Kodashim was slaughtered to the north. Shlishi Loi Shar Beis HaMoikad, the third one to the right of that is Shar Beis HaMoiked. That's where they had meduros, bonfires for the Kohanim to warm themselves up. V'tanya, and it says in the Braisa, Chamesh Tevilos V'asora Kedushin Toivel Goyin Gadol Mikadesh Boy Bayom. There were 5 Tevilos and 10 Kedushin that the Kohen Gadol had to then do on Yom HaKippurim. V'kulam B'kodesh Al Gal Beis HaParva. All of them were performed on the Gag of the Beis HaParva, where there's a natural spring for him to toivel himself, and that was in Mokom Kadosh, because that was in the Azara. Chutz ma mizu shahaisa bechol, except for the first one, which is outside of the Azara. Namely, it was in the Shar Hamayim, on the south side. Al gabe Shar Hamayim ubetzah lishkosor haisa, and next to that was his lishka. So we see there was a lishka next to the Shar Hamayim over there in the south. So now says Rav Papa, we mentioned that the Kohen Gadol, says Rav Papa, had 2 lishkos. One was lishkas haparhedin, and one was lishkas avtinas. And the question he asked now is, V'lo yodani lishkas parhedin betzofon, or lishkas beis avtinas bedorom. Which one was in the north and which was in the south? In other words, we already proved that he had 2 lishkos, one in the north and one in the south, but we don't know which one was where. Or lishkas beis avtinas betzofon, lishkas parhedin bedorom, or was it the beis Avtinas in the north, and the Lishkas Parhedrin was in the south. Says Rav Papa, umistabro de Lishkas Parhedrin b'domrum hayo. It's mistabro to say that the Lishkas Parhedrin was one is in the south, and Avtinos was in the north. My time, what's the reason? He proves, because Mekadim koi umesach es ragla v'tovil. Because the first thing is he gets up in the morning, he has to then go to the bathroom, and then he's toivel. Then he can go ahead and enter the Azara, and he goes va'ozel itzofoin v'gomer chafina. Then he goes through the Azara from south to north, and then he learns the chafina, which we're saying is then in the north in Beis Avtinas. Va'ozel Beis Hamikdash va'ovid avoda kuli yoma. Then he does the entire avoda throughout the day, practicing for Yom HaKippurim. Lebahadi panya meida olu ale. At the end of the day, they sprinkle him with mechatos. Then he goes down to the south, then is toivel in the mikveh once again, and he rests and goes to sleep in his quarters over there in Lishkas Parhedrin. So that would make it so that he doesn't have to then go back and forth in an inconvenient way. Again, he starts in Lishkas Parhedrin in the morning. He is toivel over there in the Lishkas Hamayim, which is right there on the bottom, over there in the south. Then he enters the Azara, first going to learn the Chafina in Beis Hatinos up there in the north. Then he goes throughout the day in the Mokom of the Mikdash in the Azara, doing different avodas, and he returns at the end of the day being Toivil and Beis Hamayim over there in Lishkas Hamayim, and he then goes to Lishkas Parhedrin and goes to sleep where it's there in the south. That would be very good to say it's in the south. The Iyamr is Lishkas Parhedrin Batsof, because if you would say Lishkas Parhedrin indeed is in the north instead, then Makdim Koi Mesach Raglov V'oz L'Dorm V'Tovil. So here, when he gets up in the morning, he goes to the bathroom. Before he goes into the Azor, he has to then be Toivil. So now he has to go all the way around the Azor. He can't cut through, because he can't enter the Azora until he's Toivil. So he has to go all the way around from the north, all the way around to the south, and then Toivil in Lishkas Hamayim, which is in the south. The Gomer Chafina, and you have to learn then the Chafina. V'osi lebeis hamikdosh. Then he would enter and do the avoid the beis hamikdosh. V'ovid avoid the kula yomer the entire day. Lahadi panya mida ale. At the end of the day, they would sprinkle upon him the mechatos. V'hader ozi ledarim v'tovel. And then he'd have to then be go back all the way to the Darom again and be Toivel. Uboy Mahader Umeiz Lesofa Meinach. And then if we're saying Lishkas Bahelen was in the north, then after he's Toivel, he can't cut through the Azara, because that would be then using it as a shortcut. He has to now go around from south to the north, where Beis HaPahedrin we're suggesting is, and then go to sleep there for the night. Would we call him such a tircha? So it's mistabir sirapapo to say that the Lishkas Parhedrin is indeed on the south, and Lishkas Avtinas is in the north. The Gemara says, Alam aloi. Why would we not matriachim? The Gemara says on the contrary, matrachina leitfei. We will cause him even more tircha. We want to cause him a lot of tircha. Why? The isaduki who lifrosh. If he's a tzedaki, then will cause him to then be paresh from the avodah. He won't want to be a kohen gadol and do the avodah because all of the tircha. He's lacking yiras shamayim. He's not interested in then being matriach himself so much. Inami, alternatively, shalotazuach daitoi alav. He shouldn't become haughty and be arrogant in his position as kohen gadol, so we will matriach him. The ilo teimahachi, and if you don't want to say what I'm saying is so, that indeed it will come out that the Lishkas Parhedrin has to be in the north, and that the Lishkas Avtinas is in the south, in order to, yes, matriach the Kohen Gadol. Na'avdinu l'travayu b'hadedadi. Why don't we put both Lishkas together, one right next to the other? Inami, alternatively, tezgilei b'chada. It should be enough to have both of them in one Lishka. So the fact that we don't put Lishkas Parhedrin and Lishkas Avtinas, that he learns the Chafina in the same place where he actually goes to sleep, or right next door to each other, shows us indeed that we do want to matriach the Kohen Gadol. And therefore, in conclusion, the Gemara is saying that the Lishkas Parhedrin is indeed in the north, and the base of Tinas is in the south.